We've got a full house, so we are going to hit the ground running. I am Erin Ford, Interim CEO of SC Bio, and this is our latest installment of our student and industry networking session. We're excited for the panel that is here today to answer many of your questions. I am going to turn things over to our intern, McKenna Robotowski, who is running the show here today. So McKenna, take it away.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. As Erin said, thank you for taking the time this morning to be here. We are joined by 5 amazing industry leaders who I know are eager to share with all of you their tips and tricks when it comes to networking, job searching, interviewing. So first, I will allow our panelists to share a little bit about themselves and their company. Then we will jump into a Q&A panel. During the second half of this morning, you will have the opportunity to join the breakout room of your choosing to either continue asking the panelists questions or to just network and learn a little bit more about what they do. We also encourage you to hop around to different breakout rooms to get the chance to speak to everyone. But first, we'll have a few introductions. So Austin, if you wanted to start off and share a little bit about yourself and Premier Medical.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Austin Shirley with Premier Medical Laboratory Services. We're a clinical reference laboratory based out of Greenville, South Carolina. I am the Director of Commercial Operations there, and we have a full suite of lab offerings, your general chemistry, blood work, allergy testing, toxicology, and lately been a lot of COVID. So, we've expanded a lot during the past 18 months to help support the COVID testing effort in South Carolina and across the country. But we've got a lot ahead of us outside of COVID as well, and happy to be here today.
Thanks, Austin. Greg and Nora from Charles River.
Okay, so I'll start, and Nora, feel free to jump in. So we represent Charles River Labs. We're based here out of West Ashley, and our headquarters is up in Wilmington, Massachusetts. So we are a leading full-service drug discovery and early-stage development company that focuses mainly on research, discovery, safety, efficacy, and manufacturing. Here locally, what we do is we manufacture reagents and instruments used for the safe release of vaccines, medical implants, any injectable drug. We've got facilities all over the world. We just happen to have about, 340 people here in West Ashley, and we have all the different functions, within a company, from sales and marketing. We have microbiologists, chemists, engineers. We run the full gamut here. Nora, anything you want to add?
I'll just introduce myself. I think Greg covered the company quite well. My name is Nora Blair. I'm the manager of the Formulations and PTS Quality Operations Lab. And so that is 2 different laboratories that I work with here at Charles River. One is kind of chemistry focused, as Greg was saying. We actually manufacture reagents for all of our saleable materials. And then the other lab is a testing lab. So we focus on in-process testing of those materials that have been manufactured here.
Great, thank you. And then Steve Clemens from VitaLink.
Hey, good morning, Steve Clemens. VitaLink Research is actually in the middle of a name change, which I haven't fully released yet. But we merged with another company that takes us nationwide and 50 locations from coast to coast. We're the sites that actually conduct clinical trials. So we're made up of the physicians, the nurses, the technicians, and the clinical research coordinators that actually see the patients on these trials. So obviously with the pandemic, we became very heavily invested into COVID. However, roots go back 20 plus years in many other therapeutic areas. So glad to be here.
Great, thanks, and congratulations, Steve.
Thanks.
So we can hop right into the Q&A panel. Students, if you have questions, we encourage you to shoot them in the chat or unmute and ask your question. We will get them answered. I will kick it off with the first question. So how important is a cover letter in an application? Anyone want to take that away?
Start. So I'll be honest, I see a number of applicants who both use and don't use cover letters. I will say probably only about 10% of my applicants currently do, and it does tend to set an applicant apart for me personally. It also gives an applicant an opportunity to kind of feature any of their experience that they particularly want to talk about. It definitely helps me if I do proceed to an interview with the candidate to know, that these particular experiences or skills that they focused on in their cover letter are things that, are probably going to be really good conversation starters and that they're a good place to start discussion. So I would say it's not necessary, but it definitely can help set somebody apart.
I think just to pivot off of that, I think the challenge is that, in all honesty, interviews just suck. I mean, it's hard to get to know somebody through a piece of paper. And so anything you can do to make that piece of paper stand out more in our eyes, from my perspective, is important to get to meet us face to face. We can see the person behind the paper. But generally speaking, just like Nora said, I probably see 10 to 15% of people use them. And especially for new grad entry level positions, you're fighting with just about everybody else out there at the same time. So anything you can do to separate yourself and make it stand out on a piece of paper is very helpful.
Great, thank you. So another question, being in the life sciences, we learn a lot of technical skills in school. So other than those skills, what do you look for in an applicant that will make them stand out?
Yeah, I think anything, so for me, it's half of the time we're looking at least I'm looking at an interviewee trying to establish, are they going to fit in with the circle of trust at the location that they're working? And so for me, it's less about specific education. It's less about specific certifications. I mean, there's some that are obviously needed, but it's more about the personality behind the person. And I think that's, again, it's hard to get through on a piece of paper. But that's kind of our main task, especially if you're dealing with multi-site companies, is to try to figure out, along with the manager of that specific location, who's going to fit in with that little circle of trust.
I completely agree. I was going to say the same thing. For somebody to be making it to the interview level, they're absolutely qualified for the position, but I'll be honest, I typically get 5 to 10 qualified applicants per opportunity. And so what really is going to make the difference is going to be the individual who communicates well, but really seems like they're going to fit in with the team dynamic, which isn't to say that they need to have the same hobbies or the same interests or anything as the individuals that they're going to be working with. But it's a scenario where, it seems that their personality will mesh well. It seems like they're going to be just sort of overall positive person to work with, gonna not bring down the team dynamic and just kind of present themselves and contribute well to a team.
And from my perspective, I'm usually only involved in the interview process for our sales team. So it's not necessarily about the qualifications or industry specific sales experience. A lot of what you look for in a salesperson sometimes can come out in that interview process. Just back and forth in discussion, and then also, activities that you've done while you've been in school, internships, sports teams, other groups, activities you participated in show that, how well you can work on a team.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I agree with everything that everybody has said here. One other thing that I look for is just to try to understand, to assess fit, what are their career aspirations? And I think it's really important that they have a vision of where they think they're going. It doesn't have to be perfect, but they've at least thought it through and thought through how perhaps, Charles River could help them with their career aspirations.
Great. Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Dave. He asked, does being a veteran help with job applications? He has heard mixed reviews.
Well, I'll speak to that. I was actually, Dave, I was in the National Guard for 12 years. So here in the South Carolina National Guard, 122nd Engineer Battalion, if you're familiar with it. But anyway, I think it certainly helps, right? There's a lot of experience that you gain through being in the military as far as leadership, team skills, and, how to take initiative. And, a lot of that really does translate depending on what the industry is and what the job is, honestly. But, I don't see many scenarios where it would be viewed as a negative.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hit on that too. Again, Navy veteran myself. Enjoyed the time in, was glad I got out when I did because the company wouldn't have been founded otherwise. But, even though historically you're dealing with a lot of very young people, some people straight out of high school in the military. And so that's where I think some of the misnomers come from, party lifestyle, just like college, I guess. I think at the end of the day, the people who have served historically have, in my opinion, a little bit of an upper hand because they already understand a bit of a chain of command. They already understand, that life is still sometimes about making sure you not necessarily are right, but you know how to go about things the right way. And I think that's something that veterans typically have ingrained into them. Again, I hate to stereotype any group positive or negative because again, there's good and bad with everybody. But at the end of the day, I definitely don't see any negative to it. And historically, I tend to be more intrigued whenever I see that.
As a non-veteran, I'll chime in. I do agree with everything that's been said so far. For me, it definitely can be an enticing piece of a job history, but that's not, or a work history, that's not the only, for me, I get applicants with and without. I don't necessarily view it as a deal breaker if a candidate does not have a military background. But as was mentioned, it does show certainly a level of commitment to something and an ability to work with a chain of command, work within a group environment. So for me, it can be an asset, but it's not the only asset I would look for, certainly.
So I would love to hear your opinion, everyone's opinion on this one. Should a resume be one page, or do you have to limit it to one, and can it be more than one?
Yes, I'll start. I don't think it needs to be one page. And, I think it's important to get out there everything you've done. I know we're talking to, new graduates and so forth. But if there's a story to tell there and it takes 2 pages, as long as it's meaningful information, I have no problem with it being more than 1 page.
Do what? Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think, again, it's all about getting through to the next step. How do you, as I said, it's almost like the resumes to get you through to the face-to-face. And I agree, one page more, I'm usually looking at just the first page, just to be honest. But if I turn to specific pieces of it, if the first page has kind of more general things that I'm at least not as interested in, but I don't think it's hit or miss either way.
I will agree with that. Keep in mind in the sciences, there's definitely a precedent for sort of a CV style resume, which definitely tends to be longer. Again, new graduate crowd, you guys probably don't have as many publications, presentations, things like that. That's fine. But just to say that, within the sciences and the STEM fields, there's definitely a precedent for more content. But to Steve's point, definitely prioritize it well. If I have to flip through 5 pages to find what your education experience is or what your last position is, at some point it makes me wonder how the organizational skills for the candidate are. So don't fill it out with fluff, but if you are truly having trouble prioritizing the important information that you think distinguishes you within a page, then a second page, occasionally a third page is justified, in my opinion.
We have a question in the chat. Which is better, participation in a large amount of extracurriculars in college or involvement in a small amount of clubs with leadership and executive positions?
I don't think I would necessarily look at one as a preference over the other. Having a diverse background of experience, if there's a lot of different type of extracurricular things you're involved in, isn't a negative thing. And then also, if there is one certain group that you've been in, whether it's a club, association, fraternity, sorority, sports team, and you have shown the initiative to kind of move up the ranks into a leadership role, that is something I think can help stand out as well. So
the only thing I'd add is, I think the candidate would have to show, what they're passionate about, not just trying everything out. It may give an indication that the candidate doesn't know what they want to do. So if they've been involved in lots of different things, they should be able to try to focus in, especially in an interview, on what most interests them and why they tried out a wide variety of, activities or clubs.
Another question, when you interview someone, what is the single most important advice you would give to the candidate you are meeting with to help them make the best possible impression?
I think it's initially just to be honest. I joke with people and I say, my job is just to see if you're going to fit in with the Fokker family circle of trust, for those who've seen those movies. And your job is to just be honest and see if we fit with you. And so, unfortunately, it's interviews have turned into the Bachelor or Bachelorette, where it's like, pick me, choose me, love me. But at the end of the day, it's really not about that. It's are we a good fit for the candidate? And so, from that aspect, I think it's just being genuine. I always ask the question, what do you want to do with your life? And people tend to give me often or too often, I see myself here forever. And I try to warn them, it's not so much that I want to see you here forever. I just want to see how we fit in with the steps that you want to take for the rest of your life. And I'm very passionate about VitaLink, or now Velocity Clinical Research, being part of, your story. And I think that's something I would just say, just be honest, because I think that's more important than anything else.
I totally agree with that. And, I think the other thing I would add is, maybe it's not the most important thing, but certainly you should want do your research about the company, that you're interviewing with. Try to know as much as you can about, what they do, the, markets they serve or customers that they serve. And, that way you can know how well you may fit in with that organization.
By all means, look at the website so you understand what the company you're interviewing does, because you'd be surprised as to how many come in and they think that we are something totally different than we are, and you're like, you would have seen it had you just looked at the website. And I think that's important to do a little bit of homework. At least it shows that you're prepared as we are looking at you.
I would echo that same sentiment about the position itself. I recently interviewed for a second shift position and had a candidate come in for the interview who didn't realize they were interviewing for a second shift position. So, just make sure that you have done your homework. You do know what position you're talking about, you're there to interview for, and then also absolutely the specifics of the company. And honestly, if you're not the right fit for that role, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you could save yourself and your interviewer some time if you already know that at the front end and, don't make it all the way to an interview.
Another question from a student, are there places in your company's research for those with a master's degree, or is a PhD the most valued qualification for a researcher?
So I won't necessarily speak for research only. I mean, I will say, so, Greg talked a bit about the Charles River portfolio. In fact, here in Charleston, we are largely a manufacturing site. We do some testing as well, but primarily we're a manufacturing site. And so we don't necessarily have a lot of individuals that I would call researchers here. However, we definitely do have some individuals with master's degrees. I myself happen to have a master's degree. We have a couple individuals within our site who have PhDs, but I would say probably the majority of our employees on site, and correct me if you disagree, Greg, but especially, testing levels, the majority of individuals have a bachelor's, and that is sufficient for that position. So, just kind of keep in mind what positions each of those degrees is going to set you up for. if you really truly want to be in clinical research, then yeah, probably pursuing the PhD is going to be the appropriate place. But if you are happy working as a lab technician for a few years and figuring the rest out from there, then, probably a bachelor's is also sufficient.
I would agree with that, Nora. And yeah, I think most of the people that come to join us for work start with a bachelor's degree. And, personally, I think it's always best to get some work experience before you go on for your master's or your PhD. We do have many PhDs throughout the company here on site. Like Nora said, we just have a small handful. And, they contribute incredibly. But we also have a lot of people with master's degrees, but the vast majority are bachelor degrees.
Yeah, and I'd say the same thing for us. People hear the term, what we do, clinical trials, and they think that it's a bunch of people researching data, and it's really not. The people who we employ, 500 or so across the US, is a majority of them are associates through bachelors that are clinicians first, whether they're LPNs, nurses, lab techs, pharmacy techs, and then some with general science degrees. And so for us, it's a matter of, what do they contribute to the patient experience through a clinical trial? Yes, we have some people with masters. I'm a family nurse practitioner by training, but I actually run the business. So it doesn't always translate to what you went to school for as to what your strengths are. So, for us in clinical trials, really the entry point is from the clinical side. And then, of course, building that into the executive side is kind of how we prefer to hire. So I would actually challenge and say it's really not the best way to get in initially. If someone applies with a PhD, they start at the same place with our company as they would with, clearly a different pay scale, but the same place. And then they have to work their way up the chain to whatever position they're doing. Of course, that is different than, say, for example, if we're hiring for a specific licensure that requires math. If we're hiring a nurse practitioner, then you have to have at minimum a master's with, your nurse practitioner training and certificates, but that's a kind of a separate issue.
And from our company's perspective, as a diagnostic and clinical reference lab, our R&D department is mostly focused on laboratory developed tests and assay development. So we do have several PhDs that work over there, but also bachelor degrees make up the most part of the lab technicians they're doing a lot of the work. So we have a range of it, and there's places for even 2-year degrees for medical laboratory technicians that have experience, bachelor degrees, and then masters and PhD. So, and I would say that's probably the case, as we've heard from the rest of the folks on the panel here, is that it's PhD or master isn't always a requirement, and there's places for bachelor and 2-year degrees as well.
I see John McElligott has joined us.
I did. Apologies. I had in for 9 o'clock and I am in a different time zone. So I just realized while I was working on my laptop that I am missing this. So I'm here.
Well, good to see you. Start you off with a good question that we had in the chat. Because of COVID, there has been limitations to people's experience within laboratories and research, as we had a virtual school year last year. So would you say this lack of experience on their resume will reduce their chances?
So from a startup perspective, we look at 2 very distinct groups, right? So we're either trying to get people that are extremely experienced, but we don't need as many people as that, but we're looking for people that are willing to work hard and willing to take big risks. So actually what's happened through the pandemic, that adaptability and having to try different things in a very short period of time is actually incredibly valuable for us within startups. So I think what we're looking for is, what did you do with that time off versus did you have more practical experience? Does that make sense? So if during that year period, if you use that to learn potentially new skills. So we had some people that we've hired that actually during the shutdown, learned more about AI and machine learning. So they took some online courses, they did some things that added to their particular skill set, but instead of just watching Netflix for a whole year. And so I don't know that, I think most employers are going to be understanding of what happened during that time period. I think what I'm looking for is, what did you do during that time period? Did you use it to gain more skills? Did you use it to do something valuable? Or did you basically just use it as a year off? So no, I don't think it's going to be detrimental. Obviously, it's something that we all experienced. So I think it's a shared experience, and there's a little bit more understanding from employers, at least on our end, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Can agree.
Go ahead, Nora.
Sorry, I can agree. As far as, technical skills, laboratory type skills, one of my groups, I mean, pipetting is probably, as far as the laboratory experience rather, pipetting is pretty much as technical as that group gets. So, if you weren't able to have your organic chemistry lab and get to learn about HPLC, that's not a deal breaker for that position. Ultimately, as John was just saying, if you can show that you did use that time to do something to develop yourself, even, maybe it was AI, maybe it was learning how to bake bread because that's something that's always interested you, but just, be able to have a good conversation about how you did use that time and how you channeled that. And I think you'll be just fine.
Thank you. So what does good follow-up look like? Do you email the person after applying, after the interview? What if you don't hear back for weeks?
I think follow-up is crucial because it's another touch point. And again, that's the salesperson in me. But at the same time, when you look at it, I think it's a fine balance of being present, but not annoying. And so you got to be able to read a room. And if you sense that you're starting to annoy them, then don't. Now, I hear tons of students tell me that during their schooling, they're told either don't follow up or go the proper channels through HR. And I know our HR team is probably going to hate me for saying this. Most of the people I've hired have been able to break through that a little bit and politely get to me directly or get to someone else directly, or impress us with some ingenuity. And I don't want to encourage 1,000 people to call a single person and try to blow them up. But at the same time, some people we've hired just happened to get me whenever they picked up the phone, and they probably wouldn't have made it through our HR process. So I would encourage people to be the squeaky wheel, but without being annoying. And that's a fine balance. There's no way I can tell you what that is, because for each of us, it's probably a different level.
I think from my perspective, I think you should ask in the interview. When should we expect to hear back from you? If not, how should I follow up? And usually there's an opportunity to interview for you to start asking questions. Maybe it's towards the end, but I think that's something to ask, and then that way you kind of know how you should approach it.
Yeah, I would probably line up a little bit more with Steve, where I can certainly appreciate somebody with some drive and determination. It's obviously different if they're in a sales position, and then I can really appreciate them hacking the system and finding their way through. But from a technical standpoint, it's incredibly unique when somebody has that level of drive and they're really trying to get to me, and they also have like an engineering or technical skill set. For us, we've been in situations very often where we've had to push through when it's been very, very difficult. Like, getting things off the ground is very, very hard. So I can certainly appreciate someone with that particular mindset when it comes to going after something like this. We're in a little bit of a different position, so the applicants that we get know what they're walking into. So we're looking for somebody with that level of drive and determination. But there is a fine line, because I do get annoyed. Like, if you're not hearing back from me after 4 or 5 times, it's not that I don't care. It's just there are a lot of things going on. So right around that level is probably when it's like, okay, circle back to the regular channels.
I think we'll have one more question, and then we can go into our breakout rooms. Someone was wondering if there are any internship opportunities available for students at your companies.
Yes. Feel free to go to the website and look around. Yes, our shortest.
Yeah, I would say the same. We always have internships available, even if they're not posted. Again, I think if you're really interested, reach out to, contact HR or whatnot, or me, or Nora. You know, where there's a will, there's a way, and we can always use interns.
Same over here. We don't have a official internship program, I'd say, but most of them come through, you know, from networking, right? And them reaching out. We don't necessarily always post internship positions, but certainly have them on staff now and have in the past. And if it's a, you know, clinical reference laboratory or light manufacturing is, you know, some of the other stuff that we do. If that's something of interest to you, then feel free to go to the website and do the contact us, and you know, we'll be in touch.
Yep, and we're beginning to ramp up in South Carolina right now, so we're definitely looking for interns. But also because we do software and AI, some of this stuff can be remote as well. So yes, we're always looking for additional support in not just the mechanical side, but also in software and AI. And another thing, and this is, I think, critically important, especially in the field of AI and machine learning, everything is new. So as an intern at our company, you'll find yourself working on some pretty sophisticated projects. Like, you're not going to be doing what's typical with an internship. So very often, a lot of our interns end up working on technologies that work its way out into the field or into our products that get developed. So that's one of the benefits, I think, being in a technical space and an intern at this point, is a lot of what you're learning and using right now is bleeding edge. So you're going to find yourself in positions that maybe in the last 5 or 10 years, at least with us, that as an intern, you wouldn't find yourself. So you'll be doing a lot of potentially customer facing, building technology that's actually going to work its way out in the wild. So, so I would encourage you, yeah, apply for internships. And in a startup, you get to do a lot of cool stuff.